Well, the former head of the State Security Agency, Arthur Fraser, has launched an objection to the nomination of the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo to be Chief Justice. Zondo is one of 7 people who are currently being studied by a panel set up by President Cyril Ramaphosa to suggest who he should nominate to the position. It's the first time this kind of process has been used. The panel will publish a shortlist, and then the process goes to the President and the Judicial Service Commission. If it sounds like a long process, it's entirely possible. I've skipped a couple of steps. Chris Oxtoby is a senior researcher at the Democratic Governance and Rights Unit at the Department of Public Law at the University of Cape Town. Chris, good afternoon to you. Do appreciate the time. It's a long process. Where are we with the entire process? What point are we at?
Good afternoon, Stephen. We are still with a way to go. At the moment, the panel, and one can sympathize with them with the scale of the task, is considering the public comment and objection that has come into the long list of candidates. Reports saying, I think, in the order of 562 submissions have been made. So they are under some time pressure to consider those comments. And then on the 29th of this month, they will prepare a shortlist. So reducing that list of 7 candidates down to, I would anticipate, 3 or 4. Those names then get sent to the President, and then we go through the more traditional process of the President putting those candidates to the JSC to be interviewed and to leaders of opposition parties to consult on them. So the process, unfortunately, still has a little way to run. But in the nature of doing it this way, with open opportunity for public input, that's, I suppose, a price that we have to pay for a more open process.
So we have this objection from Arthur Fraser to Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. I understand there are also objections to several other candidates. I'm sure I've missed some, but I think the ones that people will be looking at particularly are the Western Cape Judge President, John Klophe, and the Public Protector, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane. How's the panel going to deal with all of these objections? I mean, there's quite a lot. 564 submissions? They're not going to have much of a weekend, are they?
No, not much of a weekend, and not much time in the evenings either, I would imagine. What they will have to do is firstly assess the complaints on their own merits. Does the evidence put forward in the complaint actually stand up? Does it indeed show that a candidate is lacking in some important respect, or is it simply a complaint born out of some dissatisfaction with the candidate over a judgment that didn't go someone's way, or something like that? So the panel has identified some criteria, and they will have to assess those objections in light of the criteria that they have set for the candidates. So, for example, the concern in respect of both Judge President Klophe and Advocate Mkhwebane will be about whether they are fit and proper people for the office, given that there are procedures that may lead to impeachment and removal from office pending against them. So the panel will have to go through that process.
It's quite an interesting situation. So as you pointed out, we've never had a panel like this before. Is the panel obligated to take each nomination and each objection seriously? Do they have to show that they considered each one? Where I'm going with this is, could there be a legal challenge to what this panel actually does, even though it's not a constitutional requirement, the panel itself?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And of course, underlying that is the concern that has frequently been raised about the need for this appointment to move quickly and for a new Chief Justice to be put in place without any undue delay, given that we don't actually have a permanent incumbent in office at the moment. I mean, it's difficult to say authoritatively without knowing exactly what the content of all 560 odd objections are. I think the panel will obviously be required to show that they've taken seriously and they've taken into account the information that is put before them. But they also must be able to dismiss obviously frivolous or irrelevant objections. So I imagine there will be a fairly robust vetting process of those objections that is going on as we speak. As for the possibility of legal challenge, it's a little bit difficult to know, well, what content that would actually take and what aspects of the process would be challenged. I would hope that we don't get derailed in this process by any challenges of that nature, because, as I say, it is really important that the position is filled quickly. But it's certainly a possibility that we can't discount.
So I mean, what that would mean is, so I mean, there are different legal steps, and as I understand the process, there's, you can launch a legal challenge to every legal step. So if the panel makes a decision to include, say, for argument's sake, Deputy Chief Justice Zondo in its shortlist, submits that to the President, that would be one legal step that could be challenged. The President then forwards that nomination along with others to the Judicial Service Commission, or doesn't include him and puts someone else in. That could be challenged. And the outcome of the Judicial Service Commission hearing could be challenged. I mean, it could be a decade before we have another Chief Justice, Chris. I mean, what is it with you lawyers?
Well, let's hope not. Let's hope the lawyers don't take the points quite that pedantically. I mean, there is a threshold for for taking these decisions on review. So, for example, judicial appointments have always been excluded from the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act. So they're not reviewable in terms of that particular piece of legislation. They are reviewable under the broader principle of legality. But you're then looking at quite a high threshold of improper or irrational behavior by the panel or by another key stakeholder in the process. So I would be fairly confident, based on what we've seen so far, that the process would stand up to any legal challenge. The difficulty, I suppose, would be if someone tried to bring an interdict to halt the procedure while a fuller legal challenge is considered. But I think a very high threshold would have to be satisfied before a court is going to uphold that challenge. And I think in the absence of some really egregious procedural error, which I don't think we've seen anything of that sort at the moment, hopefully the process will be able to proceed smoothly.
I mean, a lot of what's happening around this and around the appointment of the Chief Justice is about politics in a way. I mean, Arthur Fraser, the basis of his objection, as I understand it, is that on his version he was not given a fair hearing at the Zondo Commission. And I mean, it would seem to me as a sort of political creature, I don't mean that I'm a politician, although Twitter I know that you will say that I am, but I'm saying that as someone who watches politics pretty much for a living, it would seem to me pretty likely that Arthur Fraser might be one of those who takes the final Zondo Commission report, chaired, of course, by the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, that he challenges that in court, and that this is part of that process. What I'm trying to get to is this objection may have nothing to do with the position of Chief Justice at all, because while Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo as Deputy Chief Justice would seem to be a perfectly adequate Chief Justice, I mean, I think there could be no objection, he has a limited time because of the term he's already served on the Constitutional Court. I hope I've got all of that right.
Yes, and I think that's a fair read. I mean, I must say, not being a very close follower of the Zondo Commission, I'm not an expert to speak to that, but my sense is that the objection is not a strong one and would not stand in the way of DCJ Zondo going forward. I think there's a much more important questions that his candidacy raises, not the least being the relatively short length of time, as you say, that he would have to serve as Chief Justice, around 3 years. And that raises quite an interesting question about, do you look to bring somebody in who's got expertise and experience but only has a short time on the job, or do you find a candidate who's going to be able to serve in the position for longer? I think those are the kind of questions that one hopes the panel and the other players in the selection process will be grappling with, not the procedural intricacies of whether or not Arthur Fraser was able to give the evidence that he thinks he was supposed to give at the Zondo Commission. I mean, my sense is that even if that complaint stacks up, it doesn't amount to a threshold that would disqualify DCJ Zondo in my personal view. But I think you're right that there's obviously a lot more politics going on behind the scenes, and this may impact on some other candidates as well, not just Zondo. Judge President Balambo, for example, coming from Gauteng, where a lot of these important political cases are heard at High Court level, that may play into the process in some way. We obviously know about the controversies around Judge President Hlophe. There may be several of these political battlegrounds that will be brought into this process. And that's why, again, it's important that the panel and the other decision makers are meticulous in identifying and applying their specific criteria for the appointment to be made.
I really do appreciate the time. Chris Oxtoby, thanks very much indeed. It's a very complex process that's underway at the moment. Senior researcher in the Democratic Governance and Rights Unit, Department of Public Law at the University of Cape Town.